All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to add Helen on here. Where is Madame?
Couldn't be to her face.
Helen, Helen, are you there? Where is she? There she
I'm here.
is.
I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. I'm
Ah.
trying. Hold on one second.
Okay.
I'm on mute. I'm on mute. I want to just make it less bright.
Okay.
Let me hope I don't turn the screen on.
Up here.
I'm going to stop.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yep. All right.
Hey, let me, well, Helen, we've had people kind of jumping on and off all morning. So, but we've saved you for the end. We really appreciate that you're.
I'm trying to get the dog out of the room. Hold on a second. Otherwise, he'll start barking.
That's okay. That's okay. So, we had some good discussions with Sandy about Irlen awareness and maybe some new things that we can do this year. So that was good. And most of the people that are on right now are trained, aged screeners. We've got two fairly new screeners that are on this page right now. So, but I'm just going to turn it over to you. Hello.
Oh, I would say good morning, but it's past good morning for you guys.
Almost.
How's everyone handling things these days? We're doing an interesting thing in the, wait a minute, I'm still trying to get this phone down, to kind of help people get by. We have some people in the neighborhood who are talented. They have musician groups that go out and typically perform for other people, and they can't do it. So what we've been doing in the neighborhood is they've been coming, and on the weekends, they'll pick a house and they'll perform at the doorway, and everyone brings their chairs and does social distancing and sits outside. So we had a lovely concert last night, and we have another lovely one coming up tonight. It's amazing how just certain little things like that to break the monotony works really well. Nancy and I talked about what we thought would be interesting for you. And I kind of was sharing with her the fact that I signed up for a 5-day seminar with Tony Robbins. Raise your hand if you know who Tony Robbins is. Okay, a lot of you don't. Tony Robbins used to do lots of, he does motivational speaking. And he used to do to incredibly large audiences. And then you haven't heard about him for a little bit. And he's come back on and to teach people how to do motivation speaking, how to get people to listen to you, how to develop a base for people, and how to market yourself. And I thought, that should be interesting. I want to get involved in this. He does a couple of things that are interesting. One is he gave away this week. It was supposed to be an hour motivation speech, but Tony likes to talk a lot. So it turned out to be somewhere between an hour and a half to 2 hours every day for 5 days. And he gave them away. And at the back end, after 5 days, he had something that he had to sell. But by that time, a lot of people were so involved and so motivated that a lot of people signed up. And he says, you know, what you're doing is not selling. And it's a good thing to keep in your mind when you talk about Irlen. You're not selling. You're sharing with them some information or some knowledge that may benefit them or somebody else. So what you're sharing is worthwhile. So don't feel like when you're talking about Irlen or when you're posting about Irlen or when you're doing anything like that, that this is something that you have to kind of downgrade, because it's not. He said, if you're involved enough and you care enough about it because you've seen the difference, you want to let the people you talk about know and see your excitement. And I had to stop for a minute and think about that, because as a woman, I've had a tendency to downplay when I talk about Irlen, or I talk about, try to get this thing so it's not so bright, talk about, the discovery and myself. You kind of like to downplay, or I do as a woman. And I realized I can't do that. I have to show the same excitement that I had 30 years or 40 years ago today when I talk to someone about Irlen. I need to share it. This is nothing to do with ego or patting yourself on the back. It's if you're excited about it, and if you can communicate that to other people, they'll get excited. Then you can go into the basics of, well, yes, this is what I do, and but you've told them why and what was those key moments that got you so excited and involved. What was it about Irlen? So I stopped and think, and I thought, I'm doing it all wrong. I need to go back, because I do lots of podcasts. I have one coming up pretty soon. And so Nancy asked me to share how I would change, or Laura asked me. Hi, Nancy. I was looking at you at the time. Asked me to share how I would now talk about Irlen to somebody I met on the street, to someone who said, hey, what do you do with your life? So I thought I would do that for you. And the other thing that I'm seeing, and I know on Facebook, is the fact that there are a lot of, the other thing that Tony did is he put people in groups and then have them post their experiences on Facebook. And he just loaded Facebook again and again that way without doing anything, getting people involved in what he does. So at the end of the day, he can sell. He has a number of products that help you market yourself. So that was his end goal for all this. But his, in between time, his goal really was to share. And that's what you have in you, this need to share, this excitement to share, the want to make a difference in people's lives. That's why we're all involved in Irlen, isn't it? And then the excitement to see the change. People have said to me or asked me, well, when are you going to retire? And I go, retire? Why would I retire? What can I do that would bring me the same level of good feelings and satisfaction that I get every time I work with a client and they look at me and they say, thank you for changing my life. Mm-hmm. Thank you for saving my life. To see kids who come in with their head down and feel like they can't do anything right, smile when you ask them now to read. It's those kinds of things that are absolutely priceless. And I'm sorry, I can't think of anything else I'd rather do to keep doing it. So you guys got me around for a long time, I have a feeling. So let me kind of come back, because I need to now show you how I would change my story, hopefully to make it as exciting for you as it was for me. And my story starts when people always ask me, well, what do you do, or how'd you discover Irlen? My story starts back 40 years ago. 40 years ago, when I was a school psychologist and I would test children, and I had to test children for them to do psychoeducational testing so that they could get special services or accommodations or any of those things that they need. And there was always a group of children who I couldn't identify as having any type of a problem. And when I come back to the teachers and say, my psychoeducational testing, which is the end all and be all, doesn't show that the child has a problem. So now what you do is you blame the child because the child's not trying hard enough. The teachers instead would say to me, come in the classroom, Helen. I want you to sit here and watch this child perform in the classroom. School psychologists never do that. They never compare what their test results show versus what's actually happening and going on in the classroom. And I sat there and I saw what the teachers were talking about. These kids were struggling. And it bothered me terribly to watch these children struggle. And I had no way of identifying them. And you have to say to yourself at some point, are these psychoeducational systems really the gold standard? Are there things that we're missing? And I also, because I oversaw as a school psychologist, what was going on in terms of the testing and the counseling at the middle school and high school level, I got to follow these children from elementary school to middle school to high school. And what I saw was, just what you know, they didn't get better, but their self-concept got worse year after year after year. And they saw themselves with a big L on their forehead. They saw themselves as a loser. And they pulled back more. They were struggling more. And I became more and more committed to say to myself, I don't have the gold standard for identifying these children. And it's affecting their lives. And it's going to affect who they are as adults. And it's going to affect what they can do with their lives. So I had this whole concept in my head is, what are we missing? What aren't we asking? What questions do we need to ask that we should ask to identify this group of individuals who was as much right as any other group to get identified and helped? And I was very lucky because I was then offered the position to start the first adult learning disability group at a university level. And I said yes, but under the condition that I could organize, we had gotten the research, it was a federal research grant from NIMH. And I had said, fine, I need to organize this as long as we can set this up with the people so that it had 3 prongs to it. One would be a research prong. And I had done research for 3 years at Cornell University under NIMH grant, studying schizophrenic genetic family patterns. So I had a history in terms of doing research. I wanted to look at my question of what's happening to these children who are now young adults, who are trying to make it at the university level and desperately struggling to do that. And I was thinking in terms of desperately struggling. They were an interesting group to study, but that was the first prong. The second prong was counseling, because I'm also, as many of you know, a therapist and have been for 40 years. So the emotional issue that happens to the children was very important to me, and especially because it carries through in terms of life and how they see themselves, the risks that they're willing to take, and what they're willing to do with their lives. So I had a counseling component, and I had a group of 12 counselors underneath me. And then we had what we thought would be a remediation component. And this is way back when. This is going back before anyone heard the term accommodations. But quickly we realized at this point with these adults, remediation is useless. You need to give them some type of accommodation so they can succeed in spite of their difficulties. So there were the 3 prongs that I had established and that we were doing research on. The group were interesting because when they met the criteria for me, they were all adults. They were all over 18 years of age. They ranged from 18 to in their 30s, who were back trying and trying and trying again to get a college education. So you couldn't say the problem was maturational. I would hope nobody would think it was maturational at this point. And you couldn't say that the problem was motivational, because these are individuals who had tried 2 to 3 to 4 times harder to make it, but were still struggling. They would stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning to get their work done. They had to read and reread and reread. They had to figure out strategies to get around it. So the problem was not going to be motivational. And it wasn't intellectual. These were bright adults. So the 3 factors that we typically blame didn't exist with this group. So I could go, okay, so what else is going on? Interestingly enough, because they were bright, because they were highly verbal, many of them had parents who persisted. So they tried any method that had been purported to help a child succeed, any method that was supposed to help their reading. These individuals went through. They had intrinsic knowledge about all of these different methods and how it helped them or didn't help them. And they're all there saying, yep, we did it. And they had psychoeducational testing not once in their lifetime, but sometimes 2 or 3 times. So when they heard that I was a school psychologist as well, they would come to the door, put 1 foot in and 1 foot out and go, hey, I've done that test. I know. And then they would tell me about all the tests, the block tests and what it was like, this and that test. And I don't want to do it again. One of the reasons why they said that is what we do when we do psychoeducational testing is they have to fail not once, not twice, but 8 times before we shift to another task, right, subtest. And then they have to go on and they fail a little bit and a little bit here and there. And then they have to fail 8 times till we shift to another one. So by the time you finish, they have been through repeated failure after failure after failure. And nobody can say to them, hey, the test is supposed to get to a point where you can fail. So we never validate them again. They were like, nope, if you're going to do more psychoeducational testing with me, I'm not walking in the door. And anyway, I know it better than you do. And I had to what I said to them was, no, we're going to use a different model. And you've all been told that we're going to use a medical model. And I'm going to ask you to tell me about what's happening to you, what it's like for you. And then they agreed to actually come in the door and sit down and talk to me. And when you heard their stories, it brought tears to your eyes, because these are people who desperately wanted to succeed, who desperately wanted to have a career, who didn't want to spend the rest of their lives feeling like a failure. And I took that to heart and said to myself, I'm going to figure this out. Why I felt I could figure it out when no one in umpteen million years had decided to figure it out, I have no idea. But I decided that I would figure out what was going on. And I did it by asking questions and getting better at asking questions. And then we tried different things. They all had a lot of the material that they had used in the past. And one of the aha moments came when one of the students brought in some red reading glasses and a red overlay. Any of you remember what that was used for? Yes, no? No? It goes way back. It never became particularly popular, but there was a theory for reading that you need to train a dominant eye. And so they used to patch one eye and have the child read with the eye that was struggling, right, Donna? Right? And hopefully that would help and train that eye. Well, it was hard to patch it, so they figured out if they had glasses that the child wore, one was red, one was green, and the child then read with a red overlay on the page, the red green would block it out, so they wouldn't have to cover the eye, close the eye, but they wouldn't be seeing through that eye. So they could train a dominant eye that way. So this adult brought in her red green glasses and red overlay and put it down on the page. And by this point, we had gotten to the point where the adults were able to tell me what was going on. Because I would ask them, tell me what was happening. Talk to me about what changes and what makes the difference. You know, the questions that you now have been trained to ask, not when you start, but what happens now? Why is reading getting harder now? What's going on? And so they had already developed an awareness of the fact that the page changed for them. And then it hurt and it didn't feel good. So they couldn't keep doing it. And it was too hard to see the print. So we have the red overlay down, and we were in a group probably about 12 adults at that point. And one of the adults looked at the page before we even started to play with the red-green glasses to see what they were doing. And she looked down at the page and said, "Ah, Helen, remember when I told you that things swirl and move? They're still doing it, but not as much." And that was the key breakthrough. It was like, wow, can color help? Can color make things better? So we rushed to the theater department and got every single colored overlay and spread out. I had a huge room at the university and spread it out all over the floor. And every one of these 20 adults went around and tried the different colored overlays and found one for themselves. Took it home and for 2 weeks journaled. What happened? Did it make a difference? What kind of a difference did it make? What changed? What improved? And after 10 weeks, they brought their journals in and they all were just dying to tell me and sat down and told me that they were reading now, that they could read longer and more comfortably. And I go, comfortably? And they go, yeah, I realized for the first time I stopped reading because it's uncomfortable. We had adults who then were saying, the words are staying still on the page. This is they were so exciting that they were running around a large university and telling everybody about it. And people were swarming to my office to go, I want to know about it. I want to try this. I want to see what's going on. And it just like went through wildfire. And for me emotionally, it was like, I don't know, I even can express how you feel when you can change somebody's life and you didn't know that you could do it and nobody else has, and they've struggled for a lifetime with this, feeling bad about themselves, feeling like they were worthless, having to put in so much extra time and effort that many of them had no opportunity to socialize, which is normal, to play sports, to do anything else. I had one girl who said to me, I used to have to stay up in high school till 2 o'clock in the morning to get my work done. And I could never get involved in sports. I had no free time to do anything else. And she goes, you know what? And someday I'd like to date and be able to get married. That was her wish in life. I had another student who was very bright and wanted to go to law school and says, I can't do it. This is my dream in life. But it takes me so long to read my work, I'll never be able to pass the test to get into law school. And when I asked him, well, how do you read what happens? He goes, well, I start reading And within a half a page, I get tired. So I have a cup of coffee, and then I start drinking coffee, which helps me. And then I'm drinking coffee nonstop. And after about maybe 20 minutes, my eyes want to close. So I read by holding my eyelids open so that they don't close, right? And he thought that was just normal to be able to do that. And it was such a thrill for him when we got to the overlay and then got to the concept of Irlen spectral filters, which I should take you to, that he could now read. And reading didn't have to make him tired. And those students who learned that they didn't have to have a headache when they were in school, that they didn't have to live with headaches or nauseous or dizziness, that that wasn't part of the reading process. Their surprise when they found that out was, doesn't everybody get a headache if they just read long enough? Doesn't everyone just get tired? They had no idea how how much harder it was for them, or switch it, how much easier it was for these other people. They go, wow, that's easy. I can now read for hours. This is easy. This is great. This is going to let me finally succeed in college and do something with my life. And I can't tell you how that felt for me. It was one of the most critical periods in my life in terms of the excitement that I felt. And you all know how you feel, right? For every student that you work with, whether it's a child who's a student or an adult who has struggled with this for a lifetime. And they realize now their value, their self-worth, they appreciate how hard they've tried. I've had adults cry in front of me. I've had military guys burst into tears when they realize how hard they've had to work and try, and that other people don't. So that's why I got involved with Irlen in the sense of creating Irlen. And because it was such a major change for these people, they talked and talked and talked and talked. So I'll share the story of how it got shared, because it's different than it is now. Now people share on the internet, they share on Facebook, and that's how people hear about it. Back then it wasn't like that. So if the story and of the successes and what we were doing at the university that I was at spread to other universities. And there was an adult learning disability specialist at another university, and he was going to go to Hong Kong University. And he said, can you train me so I can, because we had developed now the method, right, of how we make people better. We went from the overlays to the uniqueness of the overlays to the Irlen colored filters so they could wear them, because we found out it wasn't just reading, it was in their environment. So I trained him, and he went to Hong Kong University and started testing children who were identified as having dyslexia. And the story, he promotes things. So he talked to newspapers, he talked on television over in Hong Kong, and the story got out. And there was a journalist living in Hong Kong whose daughter had dyslexia, and her best friend ran the TV station, the largest TV station in Australia, right? Here's the links. And as a journalist, he was interested, and as a father, he was really interested. And this is at the very, very beginning. And he called me up and said, I want to bring my daughter to see you. She has dyslexia, and we're coming from Hong Kong. And I said, are you coming along with your daughter? And he said, yeah, my wife has to stay home with the other kids. I said, oh, why don't you come stay at the house? Then I had to tell my husband I invited a total stranger to stay with us. This is really at the very beginning. So he came over, and his daughter had Irlen, And he saw his daughter read. She just picked up a book and just when she had a moment and read for the first time. And it affected him so deeply that he called the head of Channel 9 in Australia and he said, "You must do a story on this." And Channel 9 has the 60 Minutes, just like our 60 Minutes, but they're totally independent, right? And so they did a story and it had the largest response in the history of 60 Minutes, Australia. And they aired 3 shows about it. And at one point, 60 Minutes US was traveling to some of the other countries that had 60 Minutes and asking them to showcase what shows they had. And of course, when they got to Australia, they showcased the show that they did on Reading by the Colors because it had such a huge response and continued to have a huge response. And 60 Minutes then came back and said to me, "We'd like to do a show on 60 Minutes." And I said no, because I didn't have the research backing that we needed to have to get on to 60 Minutes for the US. And I held them off until I felt we had enough research. And then we did 60 Minutes US. And I don't know if you know the backstory on that in the sense that it had the largest response in the history of 60 Minutes up until that time. They flooded the phones. 60 Minutes, ABC, NBC, what are they? NBC, right? CBS, which one? I don't know, the Channel 4 here. Anyway, they have a huge building in Manhattan, and every person in there was taking phone calls because they had seen the show and wanted to know how to get to help themselves or their child. It flooded the phone lines to the US so that it literally shut down the phone lines. It overwhelmed the phone lines to California. It was so exciting. It was like such new information and so exciting, and people could relate to it and identify either themselves or their child. And then it's never stopped being exciting for me. It never stops bringing tears to my eyes. I never stopped feeling that sense of I'm making a difference in somebody's life. And so I'm glad to be able to share my story with you. And, and then you could go on and say, and ask you, well, tell me more about what it is that you do. Then you can talk about it as a visual processing problem that calms the brain down, because your brain's your most important organ. It controls how you think, how you feel, how you act, and how you perform. And everybody needs to have the best brain possible. And those that do get through life so much easier and faster and more successfully. And so that's what we're doing. Today, people more and more are relating to the fact that there are lots of glasses out there now. You have blue blockers and other glasses, so it's a little bit easier to talk about the fact that color makes a difference. Point is that for Irlen, we know that everyone's brain is individually different from everyone else's, and that no one color will work for everybody. Blue blockers are just filtering out the wavelengths of light below UV. Some of them don't. They block it out more so you actually see the color, but everybody is wearing the same color, although everybody's brain is uniquely different, as everyone has uniquely different fingerprints. And so some people may get some benefit, but they're not going to get what they really need. Some people wear them and it changes the color, so whites aren't white, and they're overstressing the brain. And some people just spend a lot of money and nothing happened. That's not what Irlen does. Irlen does a screening to make sure that you're going to benefit from this method. You get to use an overlay so that you get to take it home with you and use it to really see the benefits and try it and test it out to make sure it's going to make a difference. And then you come and you keep your second appointment and get tested for Irlen spectral filters, which is the only way we can change the signals to the brain for each individual for maximum performance, comfort, attention, concentration, and protecting your health and well-being. So that's it, on the money, right, Laura?
That's wonderful, Helen. I really appreciate the story, and I'm glad you said something about the blue blockers, because the blue blockers are, everybody's talking about blue blockers, and now I'm even getting their children who are getting their glasses made. They're putting blue blockers on them immediately without, you know, and I've I've seen this, like they don't even have a choice. So
I will tell you why that's happening in a couple of reasons. One is the fact that optometrists buy into anything that's going to let them charge more money for the glasses.
mm-hmm.
So UV, you and I know because we work with it, is bad for some people.
Yeah, me.
Yeah, that they can't handle it. But because they get to charge extra money for putting UV on, all the optometrists add UV in, and there is no research that shows that UV affects cataracts. If you ask any ophthalmologist, they'll tell you that as you age, regardless, you're going to get cataracts. That's related to age. It's not related to whether you're blocking UV or not. So they got to add now for UV. Now they're getting to add both UV and they're adding blue blockers because that's another price point for them. So that's why everyone's doing it. The research is not that solid, and it was based on one research study. And again, the one size fits all concept really bothers me. I was at a conference once where they were selling blue blockers. So people were buying them, putting them on, walking around, and they came over to my booth. And the first question I'd ask them is, look down at the page and tell me what color. Look down at the page. It was a white page. What color do you see? And I can't tell you how many of them the blue block has changed the color of the white page.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I know that that's changing the brain in a negative way.
Right.
So that was the simplest way I could convince people that this is not good for them. And when people ask me, are you going to add, blue blockers? And I say, yeah, if it's just another wavelength of light below UV, so it's below the 400 nanometers, 300 nanometers, that if you need it, yes, it will be added, but only if you need it.
Right.
Otherwise, it's not going to make any difference for you. That's what we do. We're the experts in determining what wavelengths of light need to be filtered. And blue blockers are just filtering a specific wavelength of light.
Very well said. Very well said.
Thank you all. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you for being part of Irlen. And thank you for all the children and adults that you have helped and changed their lives. So from my heart to your heart, a big kiss. Thank you.